AMA where you guys can ask me anything you want about the investment banking recruiting process. Okay. So, as usual, every month we kind of change up the topic a little bit. And so today we're going to be talking about um, whether it's too late to recruit for a summer 2024 internship at this point in the process. Okay. Because this is probably the number one question that we've been getting lately from a lot of people who just finished sophomore year and are rising juniors, and they've been recruiting for investment banking for the last 5 to 6 months, because that's how long the process has been going on for, and they haven't had any luck so far. They haven't been able to secure an offer, and they see all their friends getting offers around them, and it's starting to feel like a lot of the firms that they were originally targeting have started to finish up their recruiting processes. And so they're wondering, like, is it too late? Is it game over? What else can I do at this point? Should I just give up? Should I go try for something else? Or should I keep going? So that's something that we're going to address today. And then, as usual, I'm going to be taking lots of questions from you guys in the audience. And so I'm going to try to answer as many as I can for about the next hour or so, which is how long we're going to be on here for. And so if you want to get your questions answered, make sure to drop your question down in the comment section. Okay. Start doing that now while I am talking, because that'll help us build up the queue. And we're live on Instagram. We're live on YouTube. We're live on LinkedIn. We're also live on Facebook, but usually there's not a lot of people on Facebook. But regardless, we're live across all these platforms. If you guys start dropping your comments down below in the queue right now, I'm going to rotate around to all the different platforms. I'm going to answer the questions in the order that they come in. And so the sooner you drop your question, the earlier your question is going to get answered. And then obviously, as I'm answering your questions, if you have other follow-up questions to something that I said, then feel free to just continue to communicate with us through the chat section of the whatever platform that you're currently on. Okay, so that's how it's going to work today. And so while we're waiting for these questions to come in, and while we're waiting for these questions to build up, first let me introduce myself a little bit for those of you who are new and not familiar. My name is Sam Shaw. I used to work at Morgan Stanley as an investment banker. I later worked in private equity at a fund called GI Partners, and then after that, I worked in a couple different tech startups, including Square, before they went public, and then also later GitHub, before they got acquired by Microsoft for $7.5 billion. Okay, and then for the last 5+ years, I've been running this company called Wall Street Mastermind, which you see on the wall behind me. And what we do is we were one of the first companies. It's becoming more and more popular now, but we're one of the first companies to start doing this coaching model for students who are trying to break into investment banking. And so basically what we do is we have a team of former investment bankers and private equity professionals that worked at the top firms on Wall Street. And we will work with you very closely one-on-one and also in a group setting to help you with whatever you need when it comes to the investment banking recruiting process, right? And so it's a very grueling process, super competitive. It's really, really tough to stand out. And so having us in your corner telling you kind of all the best practices to follow, and also because we've worked with almost 1,000 students at this point over the last 5+ years, we have a lot of experience in terms of what works, what doesn't work, and just showing you a lot of the tricks of the trade to, one, save you a lot of time, and two, not only that, but for the same amount of work that you're putting in, because you're going to have to work hard no matter what, for the same amount of work you're putting in, helping you maximize the outcome that you get, right? Like whether that's going from not being able to get an offer on your own to actually being able to get your foot in the door, that's a huge difference. But beyond that, like even for a lot of people, it's like, hey, they could have gone into a middle market bank on their own, but we get them to the bulge bracket bank, right? Or they could have gotten to the bulge bracket bank on their own and we get them to the elite boutique. Or maybe they could have gotten to the top bank on their own, but we get them straight into the buy side, right? It's like every single person that's starting out entering this process, think of your profile, and based on your profile, you all have a floor and a ceiling in terms of like what's possible and what's realistic. And our job is basically to come in, take whatever your current floor and ceiling is and raise that, right? And if we can raise that, because we've done this almost 1,000 times versus you're doing this for the first time and trying to figure everything on your own and doing a bunch of trial and error and making a bunch of mistakes and wasting a bunch of opportunities, then what happens is what used to be your ceiling now becomes your floor, and you end up getting a much better outcome, which then affects your future career trajectory, affects your compensation, affects the prestige of the firm that you end up at, affects the exit opportunities. So this can have a long-lasting impact on really like your success for the next not to exaggerate, like 20, 30, 40 years, right? And so that's kind of what we do. And we've been very successful. The students who actually go through our program actually complete the work that we ask them to do historically have placed into these firms with an over 90% success rate, right? So long story short, like I know a thing or two about investment banking recruiting and also about private equity recruiting, which is why if you're here, make sure you take advantage of the time that we have here today. Use the next 55 minutes or so to ask as many questions as you can. Typically, I don't, answer questions like this for people that are not in the program already working with us, but I do try to find the time to do this once a month, which is what we're doing right now. And so I'm going to go through and try to answer as many questions as I can for you guys. And then, at the end of this hour, like hopefully we get through all the questions. If we don't get through all the questions and you have more follow-up questions, you can always feel free to reach out to me either by messaging me on my LinkedIn profile, or you can message us through our Instagram page, which is just at wallstreetmastermind.com. Okay. So we're not .com, just at wallstreetmastermind is the Instagram handle. All right. So with that said, that's a little bit about me and why you should even pay attention, right? I always like to start with that because it's like, if you don't know who you're listening to, then why the hell should you spend an hour here, right? But hopefully, all the questions that we have coming up will be super helpful for you. So with that said, let's dive right in, okay? Before we do, I do want to answer a few questions that people submitted ahead of time on Instagram earlier today. And so one of those first questions there that we got was what's the top IB groups at JPMorgan? So to be honest, like top IB groups at JPMorgan is one of the rare banks where like they're almost like universally good across the board. Like not to give you a cop-out answer, but like if you actually go and look at the league tables, like if you go look at the Financial Times league tables, you can Google FT league tables, and then you click into it. There's a table in there where they show there's a tab called Banking Leaders. And if you go look at Banking Leaders, there is a section where they look at like which bank is currently has generated the most deal fees across all the different industry coverage groups. And then if you look at it right now for 2023 year to date, I'm looking at the screen because I just pulled it up. JPMorgan is number one in financials, which is financial institutions group, energy and power, which typically is like oil and gas. They're number one in healthcare. They're number one in government agencies, which is probably public finance. They're number one in telecom. They're also number one media entertainment. They're number one in consumer staples. And so that's a lot of different groups, right? And I'm not familiar with all the different industry coverage groups because I used to work in tech. But even in tech, number one right now is Morgan Stanley, which is my alma mater. Shout out to Morgan Stanley. But I know that year after year, consistently, like JPMorgan top three in technology as well, right? So, and I know their M&A group is really strong as well. So like, bottom line is, if you're doing group placement at JPMorgan, like that's one of the few banks where you actually don't even have to worry too much about what group you end up in. Like chances are more likely than not, you're going to end up in a group that's really, really strong. So hopefully that answers your question. Like, I don't know, like relatively speaking, which one of those groups is the top group. To be honest, I think like people get way too like into the weeds on that kind of stuff. I would say like when you're picking a group, yes, you want to pick a good group, but if most of the groups are good, I would actually optimize for like what industry are you actually just the most interested in? Like genuinely, what industries do you care about the most? Like back when I was in college or when I came out of college, like I wanted to cover tech because I think the technology industry is the most interesting industry out there and will continue to be the most interesting industry, and it's the future, right? And I say like go for the group go for the industry that you're the most interested in because you might not stay in banking forever, right? And if you like, in fact, most people more often than not do not stay in banking in the long haul. Like they kind of do banking for 2 years, right? And then they use that as like a launching pad to do other things for the rest of their career, right? And so if that's you, like if you're going to go into private equity later, or you're going to go to hedge funds or venture capital, or like me, like, you're going to go corporate after private equity, like a lot of times, whatever industry you covered in banking will end up influencing what industry you end up in afterwards. So like I ended up in tech. I ended up working for Square, working for GitHub. Even when I was in private equity, I ended up, investing in tech companies, primarily data center companies. That's because I did tech when I was in banking, right? And I'm glad I ended up in tech because tech as an industry, like aside from finance, I would say the tech industry is probably the one other industry that has the most upside, right? And so anyway, that's kind of how I would go about that. Okay, I know that's not like the exact question that you asked, but I'm trying to kind of read between the lines in terms of why you're asking that question. And so hopefully that helps. All right. The other question was from Pablo ZPGG, who asked, when are the 2024 summer internships opening for apply? Assuming you're talking about the United States, the summer 2024 internships have actually been open for like at least 6 months now. Like that's why, like for most people who are recruiting for summer 2024, they're actually feeling like it's getting pretty late. If you're asking this question, I suspect that you probably are not very in the loop on like investment banking recruiting in general. Although you're talking about like some other locations, like for example, Europe, I think that process is not going to start until probably August or September for like the London office. But if you're talking about the United States, it's been ongoing for 6 months and it'll probably continue for the next 6 months. Although obviously like a lot of the top tier banks are done at this point, which is something we're going to talk about in a second. And like, you know, the longer you wait to secure the offer, typically the worse the offer is going to be, like the further downstream you're going to have to go. Right. So that's the answer to that question. And by the way, before I continue to answer more questions, right? You know, because I see this one other question here. Kush Patel on LinkedIn is asking like, what should my strategy be to still recruit into investment banking for summer 2024? So I should probably talk about that a little bit because that literally is like the topic of this Q&A today, right? So let me just kind of monologue a little bit about my thoughts on summer 2024 recruiting. And I'm sure you guys will probably have a bunch of follow-up questions once I kind of go through that, right? So if you've been recruiting for summer 2024 and you still haven't received an offer at this point, a couple things, right? One is you're probably, if I had to guess, and just from my interaction with other students that are in that situation, you're probably a little bit stressed out, right? And you're probably feeling like, hey, like everyone around me is getting offers. I still haven't gotten anything yet. Feels like all the top banks are closing, at least all the banks that I was originally targeting at the top of my list. And so like, is it too late? Should I give up? Am I not cut out for this? Like a lot of these voices start to creep into your head and you start to have these self-doubt, right? I think at this moment in time, if that describes how you're feeling, it's a critical juncture and you have to make a decision, right? And the decision you first have to make is like, how important is it for you to actually break into investment banking? Because if your answer to that question is like, well, you know what? It's actually like not that important. Like, I would like to get into investment banking, but it's not a big deal if I don't. And I think I would be just as happy doing, I don't know, consulting or something else. Or there's plenty of other jobs out there. Then like, honestly, you're probably not going to make it. Okay. Because in my experience from working with almost 1,000 students, like the only people that break into investment banking are like super hungry and they have to get in at all costs and they will not give up, right? Like they do not give up easily. Like even like speaking of my own experience, like back when I was recruiting for banking, when I was recruiting for my summer internship, I ended up at Bear Stearns for my junior summer, which was the summer of 2007. Now Bear Stearns no longer exists because it's kind of like the Credit Suisse back in my days were like, you know, they kind of went under and then they got acquired by, at the time, JPMorgan, right? They got acquired by JPMorgan for $2 a share. But like I ended up going to Bear Stearns and that was like the last summer that Bear Stearns existed because that was the summer when their two hedge funds collapsed. It triggered the start of the financial crisis, the 2008 financial crisis that I'm sure you guys all have heard about. And then so like by the end of the summer, that happened during my internship. So by the end of our internship, none of us got return offers, right? And so it was a really shitty thing because then we all had to recruit for full-time. And I was like, it was a gut punch because I was like, you know, usually you get your summer internship and you expect to get a return offer from that. And then like, at that point you're in banking, right? And so I felt like I got this close, even though Bear Stearns wasn't necessarily like my top choice bank, but it was still like, you know, a lower tiered bulge bracket bank at the time. And then like elite boutiques didn't exist back in those days because that was pre-2008, right? All the elite boutiques came out after 2008. So it was still a pretty good bank. I was like probably a top 10, top 15 bank, right? And so it was a gut punch, right? A lot of people would have given up right then and there, but I was like, no, came too far. I'm this close. I'm going to continue to recruit for full-time. I recruited for full-time, but the problem is when you try to recruit for full-time without having a return offer at the end of your summer, it's extremely difficult. It's extremely difficult to get a full-time offer because most of the firms are wondering like, well, why didn't you get a return offer from your summer internship? Like if you don't get a return offer from the firm that you worked with for 9 or 10 weeks, does that mean something's wrong with you? Like if Bear Stearns won't even hire you, like we probably don't want to touch you with a 10-foot pole, right? And so when I recruited for full-time, it's ironic because I got probably every single interview that I applied for, because I had Bear Stearns on my resume, right? So I had like probably 20 plus interviews from bulge bracket and middle market firms, because again, elite boutiques didn't exist at the time. And I got rejected by like the first 20 plus firms that I had interviews with, because all of them asked me like, hey, did you get a return offer? And I'm like, you can't really lie about that stuff because it's really easy to find out and confirm. And even though I had everyone knew what was going on in the news. Everyone knew why Bear Stearns went under, but it just made it so difficult. And I got so many rejections. I got 20 plus rejections. And it was literally down to my last 2 interviews that I had. And I remember I was down to Deutsche Bank and Jefferies. And I had super days with both of them on the same day. I had the Deutsche Bank super day in the morning. And I remember walking down the street, or maybe running down the street on California Street in San Francisco, because that's where the Deutsche Bank office is. And Jefferies also happened to be on California Street, but just like, down the street 2 blocks, right? Finished the super day with Deutsche in the morning, ran down the street, went to the Jefferies office, did that super day all afternoon. And so I went through like an entire day, maybe like 10 hours worth of interviewing. And those are my last 2 interviews. And those are the only 2 offers that I got when I recruited for full time. And the rest was history. Like, I ended up taking Deutsche Bank over Jefferies, which if it was today, I would probably take Jefferies over Deutsche Bank, to be honest, because they've kind of switched places in terms of how well they're doing. But back in the days, like, Jefferies was a middle market bank, Deutsche was a bulge bracket bank. So I took the Deutsche Bank offer. And then the rest was history, right? Like, that's how I became an investment maker. And then after I stayed at Deutsche Bank for a year, I lateraled to Morgan Stanley. Why am I telling you all this? Coming back to my point, the moral of the story is this. Like, most people, if they were in my shoes, they get a summer internship and they don't get a return offer through no fault of their own, such a gut punch, they might be, it's very deflating. They might have given up then, right? Even if they didn't give up and they go through full-time recruiting, if they got rejection after rejection after rejection after rejection, most people, like, if you do not have like a strong enough willpower, like, you're not persistent enough, you probably give up, right? Like, after 3 rejections, you're like, okay, maybe I'll get the next one. After 5, you're like, maybe something's really wrong. I don't know why I can't get these offers. After like 8 rejections, you're like, okay, maybe I'm like really not cut out for this. And after like 10, 12 rejections, you're like, okay, like, I'm throwing in the towel, right? And so, like, the ability to get knocked down and continue to get back up, right? To use like a boxing analogy, like, you get knocked down, you get back up, you get knocked down, you get back up, like, to repeatedly do that over and over and over again and just not quit, like, that's half the battle, right? Like, most people, I wasn't smarter than most people. I wasn't better at interviewing than most people. In fact, I wasn't very good at interviewing at all back then, which is ironic, right? Considering that I now coach people on how to interview. But like I just outlasted most people. And you ask, like, well, why didn't you stop going, Sam? And it's like, the reason why I didn't stop going was because, like, this was too important for me. I felt like I had spent like my entire college career, like the entire first 3 years of my college career was dedicated to doing everything I could to break into investment banking, right? Whether it's like doing internships, joining the right clubs on campus, like networking with bankers, studying for interviews. Like, it was something that I had thought about for years, like basically like every waking hour that I had, right? And I came this close and I just couldn't give up, right? And also, like, there are other personal reasons, like, oh, my parents made so many sacrifices for me. They immigrated to this country. It was really tough growing up. We didn't have a lot of money. I was very motivated to want to make a lot of money. Like, there's a lot of personal reasons. Like, you have to really ask yourself, like, hey, how important is this to me? Why is it that important? And like, is it worth it to keep going? Or should I just go do something else? Right? So that's the first thing. Now, if you ask yourself these questions and you determine that, yeah, like, this is worth it, I do want to keep going, I can't give up, and this is something that I have to have, then let's talk strategy and tactics, right? Which comes back to Kush's question. And probably a lot of you have these same questions, like, okay, well, if I'm still recruiting now, like, what do I do? Right? Now, the first thing you got to ask yourself, and you got to be really, really honest about this, is you have to ask yourself, like, where is the breakdown happening? Why haven't you gotten an offer yet? And this answer is going to be different for everyone. Okay. So, like, I don't have the answer for you. You have to really diagnose your process to date and figure out what's happening, right? Is it like, I'm not even getting interviews at all, right? Because that's a different problem than saying, like, I've been getting interviews, but I'm just not passing interviews, right? And if you say, I'm not getting interviews, okay, we can double click into that. And it's like, well, why do you think you're not getting interviews? because typically if people aren't getting interviews, it's one of two things. One, their resume sucks, right? And resume sucking could mean a number of things. It could mean like you don't go to a target school. It can mean you don't have a great GPA. It can mean you don't have any relevant experience on your resume. It can mean your resume is just like poorly formatted. It could be all of the above. It could be only a subset of the above. Like you don't need to check every single one of those boxes. In our experience, you don't need to check every single one of those boxes to get a job. But like if you are weak in one of those areas, you're gonna have to make up for it in other areas, right? So that could be one of the reasons why you haven't gotten interviews, right? Or alternatively, if you're like, no, my resume is awesome, I expected to get a lot more interviews, but I just haven't yet. Then the other reason why you might not have gotten interviews could be that either you haven't done enough networking, because a lot of people don't usually, in my experience, or they think they're doing enough, but they're actually not. Or the other reason could be you're doing a lot of networking, but you suck at it. And so like your networking is not really going anywhere. Like, because the whole point of networking is to get the referral from the banker, right? So if you're not getting referrals from the bankers that you're networking with, then that means you're doing something wrong, right? I'm not saying you should be getting referrals from every single banker, because ultimately that's not going to happen. But what is your conversion rate, right? Like for every 100 banker you reach out to, how many of those bankers actually reply and agree to talk to you? And for every 100 banker that talks to you, how many of those actually end up referring you and helping you get an interview, right? Those are usually like the key performance indicators or KPIs that we're looking at least when we're working with our students, right? And so that's like one example, right? Like if you haven't been getting interviews, you need to be asking yourself, like, be really honest, by the way. Like a lot of people, like they kind of put their hand in the sand and they're unwilling to really see where their flaws are or where they're messing up, right? And so like, be really honest with yourself. If you want to help yourself, be honest about what issues you're currently having, what challenges you currently have. Versus like, let's say the flip side, if you've been getting a ton of interviews and you're just not converting those interviews, then that's a totally different problem, right? Then for that, I would say it's like, well, what kind of questions have you been getting during your interviews? Or have they been mostly behavioral interviews? Have they been mostly technical interviews? If it's technical interviews, it's usually pretty easy for you to determine if you did well or not. Like usually you know how to answer the questions or you don't, right? It's pretty black or white. And so if it's the technicals, that's actually pretty easy to diagnose. And if you don't know how to answer the technical questions correctly, then we need to think about like, okay, how have you been learning your technicals so far? How have you been doing your prep? And why is it not working? Like, why are you not retaining the information? Why are you not understanding it? Why aren't you able to answer these questions, right? If you've actually been nailing your technical questions and you're still not getting offers, like you feel like the interview goes well, like a lot of times people feel like, oh, I feel like I crushed that interview. And I come back and they're like, I thought I was for sure going to move on to the next round, or I thought I was for sure going to get the offer, and then you still don't, then usually by process of elimination, it's going to come down to your behavioral interviewing skills, right? Because usually for that, it's a bit more difficult to diagnose, because if your answer sucked or the banker didn't like your behavioral answers, usually they're not going to tell you that. And usually you're not going to realize that your answer sucks, because like if you actually thought your answer sucked, it wouldn't have been your answer, right? So that's the first step, is like diagnosing the problems, right? Once you've identified where the breakdown is happening, and it could be in multiple areas, it could just be in one of these areas. Even if it's just in one of these areas, like that's enough to kind of like eliminate you from getting an offer, because think of this as a funnel. And like, if there's a breakdown halfway through the funnel at any point, you can't get through, right? The second step though, once you figure out what the problem is then you got to start thinking about like, how have I been approaching it so far? And why is it not working? And what could I be doing differently? And what could I be doing better? And this part is also challenging a lot of times to figure out on your own, because again, if you knew what you could be doing differently, then you probably would have already done it, right? So this is where like, if you don't know, or if you can't quite figure it out, and even for that first part, if you can't quite diagnose where the issue is, that's where my suggestion would be for you to find someone who actually can diagnose it for you and talk to them. If this means like you have someone in your network who's actually worked in banking and they can actually like, I don't know, test you on these things and give you advice, like they're actually willing to sit down and spend the time to do that with you, then I would do that, right? If you don't have someone like that, which a lot of people don't, then I would encourage you guys to maybe jump on a call with our team, talk to us. Again, we've helped almost 1,000 students at this point, and we're very, very good at diagnosing this kind of stuff. And we can give you some feedback on, where the issues are occurring and like how you can troubleshoot it, right? And then like after that, if you want to go and troubleshoot it on your own, or if you want to troubleshoot it with us, with our help, either or, it doesn't matter. It's up to you, right? And so if that's something that you guys think would be helpful, the way you can do that is by going to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. Okay. The street's abbreviated to ST. So it's wallstmastermind.com/apply. You're going to fill out a quick application with like just 5 quick questions about yourself. And then, you'll either be able to book a call or we'll get back to you depending on kind of what our team's availability looks like. Like a lot of times our calendar is pretty full. And so it's kind of first come, first serve. And we can't always help everyone right away, which is also why you have to fill out an application. Okay. So anyway, that's the second step, right? You got to diagnose the problem, figure out what you could be doing better. And then the last step was like, then obviously you got to go and fix those problems as quickly as possible, right? Why do I say as quickly as possible? Because at this point in the process, and this is probably the other big question that a lot of you have, is just like, is it too late? And like, if I start working on these things now, is there still enough time for me to actually get this offer? So there's a couple things I would say there, right? I would say like, if you're targeting elite boutiques, it's probably too late at this point for summer 2024, okay? Because most, if not all, the elite boutiques, as far as I know, are done with the recruiting process. They usually finish recruiting by the end of this end of sophomore year before the summer starts. So we're pretty much already past that, right? If you're targeting a bulge bracket bank, in our experience, most bulge bracket banks will start recruiting before, or basically during the second semester of sophomore year. Some bulge bracket banks will finish recruiting before the end of sophomore year. And then some bulge bracket banks will continue to recruit into sophomore summer, which is where we're at right now. If you're graduating in the class of 2025, right? You're in the summer between your sophomore and junior year. And typically, if we break that down further, the European bulge bracket banks are the ones that recruit a little bit later than their American counterparts. So like the Goldman, Morgan, JP, Citi, BofAs of the world, they tend to recruit a little bit earlier. And it's not universal, right? Also, like for each of these firms, they typically recruit diversity first, then they go to their target schools, then they go to their non-target schools. So for example, like I know for Citi, they have given out some offers, but like they haven't done their non-target recruiting yet, and they usually don't do that until the fall, right? So those are like the American banks. And then for like the European banks, it's usually like the UBS, Barclays, Deutsche Bank, and then before there was also Credit Suisse, but obviously they're merging with UBS, and they're probably going to get like that's combining into one firm. So there's going to be a lot fewer jobs there, right? So those are kind of like the European counterparts, which I would say has a higher probability of you still being able to place in there if you work really, really hard throughout this upcoming summer, right? But the goal is like, if you want to get an elite boutique or bulge bracket bank, you're going to have to aim to secure an offer before you go back to school for junior year, okay? Now, if you are still recruiting going into junior year, then I would say like you're mostly left with the middle market banks. In fact, some middle market banks will also be done at that point. Like some middle market banks have already wrapped up, but there'll still be middle market banks that are still recruiting probably throughout the first semester of junior year, okay? And so if you think about bulge bracket and elite boutique banks as like the top 20 banks, I would think of middle market banks as like probably like the next 30. So like say top 50 to top 75, right? Depending on how you want to kind of define these. And then like once you're out of the top 50 to top 75 banks, then you're probably into like the lower middle market banks, right? Which is like maybe like the next 25 to 50 banks. And then below that, I would say like you're mostly looking at regional boutiques. Okay. So that's the way I would kind of think about the timeline. Like you have probably until the end of your first semester of junior year to get a middle market bank. And then if you're still recruiting into your second semester of junior year, now you're probably looking at regional boutique banks. Now, why is this timeline important? Because obviously your goal is to get into the best bank possible for your summer internship. Okay. But also a lot of you think of like your summer internship offer as like the end all be all. You guys think of your summer internship offer as like, oh my God, this is what I got. And so this is where I'm going to end up. This is what's going to define the rest of my career. It's like, no, it's not. You have a very long career ahead of you. This is literally just the very, very first step, right? Just think about my example. I started out, I did my summer at Bear Stearns, and then I did my first year of full-time at Deutsche Bank. And then even after my first year at Deutsche Bank, I lateraled to Morgan Stanley. I worked in their technology investment banking group, which is one of the best groups on all of Wall Street. And I didn't start there. That was like my third stop. Right. And so that's like one of the first key takeaways that I want you guys to know is like, if you're feeling behind, if you're feeling like, oh, everyone else has already gotten offers and I'm the only one left. Well, like, first of all, don't compare yourself to other people because that's irrelevant, right? Like you don't know what other people have gone through to get to where they are today. Maybe they worked a lot harder than you. Maybe they started a lot earlier than you. Maybe they have much stronger connections than you. Maybe their family's connected, right? Maybe they have resources that you didn't have, right? Maybe they were in Wall Street Mastermind. They had our help and you didn't, right? And so like, there's no point playing the comparison game. The only person you should be comparing to is yourself, right? How do you get a little bit better than you were yesterday? Get 1% better every single day than the version of you from yesterday. And if you're always like, even if you're falling, but you're falling forward, then eventually you're going to cross the finish line, right? It's like, to use a football analogy, if you run the ball every single play and you're only picking up 1 yard, 2 yards, 1 yard, 2 yards, but you're falling forward every time, you're not going backwards, right? You're not getting sacked. You're not getting tackled for a loss. Eventually, you do that enough times, you're going to cross the finish line and get into the end zone, and you're going to score, right? Now, the problem is like, how long is it going to take you, right? The longer it takes you, typically the further downstream you're going to have to go to smaller and smaller banks, which is why I always explain this to people, like the benefit of having help or, getting like coaching from like a service like Wall Street Mastermind is that we're going to be able to help you get to where you want to go a lot faster, which typically means it's going to be a better offer. And then so you get a better outcome, you get higher pay, better exit opportunities, more prestige, so on and so forth, right? Now, with that said, wherever you end up, the most important thing is just to end up somewhere. End up somewhere for your junior summer. Get your foot in the door. And then if you can get your foot in the door, then at the end of your summer internship, you can always recruit again for full-time. And then at the end of full-time, even if you don't like where you end up for full-time, you can do what I did. You can lateral, right? And so we have so many students that we worked with in Wall Street Mastermind. It's like, we helped them for summer recruiting. Then at the end of the summer, they're like, hey, I want to recruit again. We help them again for full-time recruiting. And then even after they go full-time, if they want to lateral again, we'll help them lateral. And like, we just help them for as long as they need. Like, there's no like, additional charge or whatever. It's just like, you have lifetime access to Wall Street Mastermind. And I'm personally a big believer in that, because I myself had to do that to ultimately get to the firm and the group that I ended up at. So I want to be able to help other people do the same thing, right? So that's kind of like our philosophy, right? So anyway, I tell you all this is just to kind of like make you feel a little bit less anxious, okay? If you haven't got an offer yet, you need to have that sense of urgency. You need to maintain that sense of urgency, because it does matter. Like, the sooner you get the offer, the better the offer is going to be. And the better your offer is, the easier it is going to be to lateral up to like a top tier bank if that's your ultimate goal, right? Like, if you start at a tier 2 bank and you want to lateral to a tier 1 bank, that's easier than starting from like a tier 5 bank and trying to lateral to a tier 1 bank. Like, that jump is much bigger, right? So that's why a sense of urgency still matters. But also, I don't want you to be like, oh my God, it's June. It's like, I just started my sophomore summer and now like it's too late to get into investment banking. I should just give up. It's like, if you give up now, you're giving up way too prematurely. Okay. Like, that's just a fact. Right. And so that's kind of like my advice for like what you need to do if you've been struggling with recruiting and you're currently still going through the process. Okay. So I've been talking for a long time. I'm going to start going through the rest of these questions, because I see a bunch of them have been coming in. And so thank you guys for being patient. But I want to just like at least get that out of the way, that baseline information out of the way. And then now let's like get into the questions, get into the nitty gritty details. I'm sure you guys have a bunch of follow-ups on like how to do exactly what I just said, right? So let me go through some of these questions here. So, okay, on the YouTube side, what do I say on phone calls with bankers? Okay, so this is like a very broad question, to be honest. But I guess there's two questions from Digby on YouTube. What do I say in my initial LinkedIn request when trying to connect with bankers? And the second question is, what do I say on my phone calls with bankers? So the first question, what to say on your initial LinkedIn request? First of all, I don't recommend reaching out to bankers through LinkedIn. Like, we use LinkedIn for research, to find the bankers, to figure out who works at what bank and who I want to target, figure out what bankers came from my school, to do that kind of research. But when we reach out, we want to reach out through email. You want to email them at their work email. Okay, so that's the first thing. In terms of what you say, usually you can, it's some combination of like one sentence introducing who you are real quick, one sentence kind of like, and also you want to mention any commonalities that you have with them, because if you have any commonalities, it's going to increase the likelihood that they actually respond to your email, because you're cold emailing them and they don't know who you are at all, right? Second thing you usually want to do is explain why you're reaching out to them, or like why, out of all the people that you could have reached out to, why did you pick them specifically? And this usually is also where you try to like kind of butter them up a little bit and make them feel good about themselves and stroke their egos. And again, this is to increase the likelihood of them actually responding to you, right? Then you basically ask them if they'd be willing to hop on a call with you. You want to provide them with some of your availabilities, but you also want to make sure that you tell them that you know how busy they are and you're happy to work around their schedule. And basically just that's like the high level gist of the email. Right now, obviously, like if we're working with you, you would draft this email, we would proofread it for you. I obviously can't do that in this format on this call right now, but that's the first question, who's like what you usually say in your initial outreach, right? And then the second thing that's really important that a lot of people don't realize is like a lot of people just stop at that first email. More often than not, you're not going to get a response to that first email. If you don't get a response to that first email, you need to follow up, okay? Maybe not like immediately the next day because that's a little bit too pushy, but you need to follow up maybe like half a week to a week later, right? And then after that, I will even follow up a third time. I wouldn't follow up more than 3 times, but in general, you can follow up to 3 times in total, including your initial outreach. And a lot of times you're going to find that you will get a response on that second or third email, even though you didn't go on the first email. 90% of the people out there don't do this, which is why they don't usually get a very good response rate, right? So that's the first thing on email outreach. Second thing is, what do you say on your phone calls with the bankers, okay? Again, this is a very high-level question, and so it's hard to answer with a lot of specifics, but like there's not like a fixed script for what you talk about with bankers. Like every conversation is like its own conversation, right? And so you have to adapt, and you have to kind of like, it's like if you're doing a dance with a partner, like you're going, if you're doing like a tango or something, you have to like, the way you would do your steps depends on also what your partner's doing, right? And then so it's dynamic. There's this back and forth, right? And so I think the mistake that a lot of people make is that they go into these networking calls and then they say, okay, I have this list of 10 questions that I've already kind of predetermined, that I've brainstormed. These are the 10 questions that I'm going to ask the banker. And they go into every single networking call and they ask these same 10 questions, right? And the conversation is just very choppy and it doesn't flow at all because regardless of what the banker says, you're just moving on to the next question and asking them the next question. And to the banker, that feels like not really like a conversation. It feels like an interrogation, right? Like, so I always tell people like, it's not an interrogation, it's a conversation, right? You have to keep that in mind. So I think about how you would talk to your friends or how you would talk to someone if you were on a first date. Like, would you come in with a list of 10 questions and then just like ask those 10 questions every single time? Like, no, you would talk to them like a normal human being. You might ask a question, and depending on what they say in response, you might ask a follow-up question. And then like you just kind of have this back and forth, right? And based on their response to your follow-up question, you might ask another follow-up question to that. Like generally speaking, the more follow-up questions you can ask, the better, because the more it feels like an actual natural conversation. And then like when you actually run out of follow-up questions that you can ask, there will usually be like a natural stopping point to that part of the conversation. And then that's when you actually ask them another question, right? So that's like the first, like I would say, big piece of advice that most people kind of don't follow, right? And so if you do that, you're going to have a lot more success and your conversation is going to feel a lot more conversational, right? And it's going to be a lot more likely for the banker to actually like you, which means you're going to be a lot more likely to get a referral, right? So that's kind of like a high-level answer to that second question. There are other like frameworks and stuff that you can use. Like for example, we teach a 5-part framework to our students in our program called the Ideas Framework, which allows them to keep the conversation not only like naturally flowing, but also very structured. But like we don't really have time to go into that all that detail on this Q&A here, because that training alone is probably like an hour long. Okay, so I'm gonna like not get too into the weeds here because we have a bunch of other questions and we'll try to like go through as many of them as I can before we run out of time. Okay, so let me go to the next question. Benjamin asks, what banks are left? Is it worth waiting to see if people ditch their offer, try for a high level bank? I kind of talked about this earlier. I mean, you probably asked this before I talked about it, but I would say at this point, like all the elite boutiques are done. There's some bulge brackets still left. There's definitely a bunch of middle market banks that are still left. And then in terms of like people ditching their offer and for like some of the higher tier banks, that does happen. But usually those banks already have people on their wait list that they've already interviewed, right? And so like if you've interviewed with the bank and you haven't heard back from them, as in like they haven't rejected you, this is why. It's because they expect people to renege, because people renege all the time. Like they accept this offer and they get a better offer and then they take the other offer and they cancel this offer. Then they're going to move down their wait list and then give it to the next person, then the next person, and the next person. And so like we've had students that have been on people's wait lists and then eventually gotten off. But it depends on like how high up on a wait list you are, because usually they're not going to have to go too far down the wait list, right? And so if you like haven't even gotten an interview with one of these firms that are already done with interviewing, like chances are like you're probably not going to get a shot to interview with them. Okay. So I would just focus on the firms that are still recruiting, but like their applications are still open, or like honestly, like none of the banks will actually like publicly announce if they're still recruiting or not. The only way to truly find out if they're still recruiting is you're going to have to network with the people at the firm, both in terms of bankers as well as people that are, you know, on the recruiting side, to make sure that you can ask them like where they're at in the recruiting timeline, because like get the information from like the source, right? Like don't get it from like, I don't know, online forums, Wall Street Oasis, or like, you know, from your friends or whatever. It's like go straight to the source and ask them. Okay. And speaking of like recruiters, like just a tangent, a kind of like random segue. I'm really excited about this, and this is like the first time I'm announcing this because we literally just finalized today. But we are actually about to bring on a new coach into our program, who used to be the head of global on-campus recruiting team. So she was the head globally for the on-campus recruiting team at 2 different bulge bracket banks. Okay, I can't disclose her identity yet, but she's going to be coming on board to become one of the coaches here at Wall Street Mastermind. And we're going to basically like make her accessible to all of our students through weekly coaching calls and also like even some one-on-one calls. And so that's going to be really, really, really amazing for the students in our program, because usually you don't get to talk to people who have so much insider knowledge about how these big banks operate, right? Like what are their recruiters actually looking for? How do they actually screen the resumes? What does the timeline look like? Like, what are they like? What do they want to hear in these interviews? Like all these things that are like, you might feel like the recruiting process is kind of a black box. There's no one more qualified than this person to be able to speak to that kind of stuff, right? So I'm extremely excited to bring her on board. And so like, if you're already in Wall Street Mastermind, make sure you stay on the lookout for that. If you're not in Wall Street Mastermind yet and you want access to that type of information, you might want to consider joining Wall Street Mastermind and working with us. Okay. So anyway, just a random little tangent. Haven't told anyone yet, but since we're on the topic, too excited, can't really keep it to myself. So just, you guys heard it here first. All right. Let me go to the next question. Lucas asks, how quick can you secure a middle market banking internship for prospective juniors before the end of their first semester through this program? Curious about the timeline through Wall Street Mastermind. Yeah, I mean, like, look, if you're coming, like, it's a great question. The answer is going to be different for everybody, though, right? Like, it depends on your profile, right? Like, we have people that come in the program and their resume is already in good shape, and so they're not really worried about like building up their resume. And so we're just primarily helping them with their networking and with their interview prep. That's going to take less time than, like, for example, some people come in and they don't have anything on their resume and they still need to go out and get relevant experience. And then only after they get some relevant experience, then they can go and worry about networking and interview prep, in which case there's like one additional step, right? Although even for people who are coming in with no relevant experience whatsoever, typically we can help you get your first relevant internship in about just 1 to 2 weeks, assuming you're actually following our instructions very closely and you are like working hard and you're staying on top of it. Okay. Like if you don't work hard, obviously it could take a very long time, but if you actually put in the work and you follow our system and process, usually on average, we see people get in 1 to 2 weeks, even if they have no prior relevant experience whatsoever. Like this is your very first relevant internship is what I'm talking about. Right. And so that's pretty amazing. And this method works like 100% of the time. Like it's worked every single time, as long as you actually do the work. Right. So that's not like a huge problem, but it does add to the time. But as far as like everything else that you have to do, I would say like learning all the things that we want to teach you in terms of like how to network effectively, how to answer your behavioral questions, how to answer your technical questions, like all those things, like knowledge-wise, in terms of like knowledge acquisition, you probably need to allocate about like 50 to 60 hours of work. Okay. So if you think about like, if you're out of school right now, it's the summer and you have a lot more time, honestly, 50 to 60 hours is like nothing. Like you spend an hour a day learning this stuff, you'll be done learning this in 2 months, right? Obviously, if you're still recruiting right now, you have a sense of urgency. You know you need to spend more than an hour a day because you don't want to take 2 months. Then you can do it a lot faster, right? We have people that get through 50 to 60 hours in like a couple of weeks. Like if you do 40 hours a week, which is like what a normal 9-to-5 job is, like you treat it like a full-time job, you could learn everything you need in like a week and a half, right? And so like it really just depends on like how much bandwidth you have and how hard you're willing to work and how much you're willing to push yourself. But of course, like in addition to knowledge acquisition, there's also like the time it takes to actually go out and implement, right? And so you have to go out and execute on the things that we teach you. You have to go out and actually network with the bankers. You have to go out and apply for these jobs. You have to go through the interviews. Like that all takes additional time as well, right? But like that's hey Joe, hey Tuana, what's up, Jolissa? That's my friend. She's funny. So anyway, like the 50 to 60 hours is like we're taking everything that you would have to learn usually on your own over probably like hundreds of hours, and we're condensing that down to the shortest amount of time possible. And we're helping you learn it a lot better than you would be able to learn on your own if you were trying to like self-teach like self-study or teach everything to yourself. And then on top of that, like we're able to get you to actually go out and do like the work itself a lot sooner. And as you're doing the work, we're also providing ongoing support and answering questions as they pop up, because they're going to pop up all the time, and making sure that like you minimize your mistakes, right? And so anyway, regardless, Lucas, hopefully that answers your question. But as far as efficiency goes, like it's not going to get any more efficient than the way we do it, because literally like when you work with us, you have like your own private group chat with me and like 3 other coaches. And it's like, we're all in the group chat with you, and you can text us like anytime, 24/7, 7 days a week, including weekends, including evenings. Like there's no like, business hours or whatever. It's like you text us anytime you have a question, and we have people around the clock that are monitoring your questions and are like responding in a timely manner. Usually like if not right away, then within a couple hours, right? So that's pretty freaking amazing. Like usually you're not going to be able to find bankers who are willing to do that for you. And that's what you have in our program, right? So you're not going to have to like spin your wheels a lot, like be stuck, trying to like Google a bunch of stuff, figure it out, read all these articles, still confused. Like that's what's going to save you a lot of time. It's like, have a question, send us a message, just ask us, we'll get back to you. And then like you figure it out, you move on, you continue to make forward progress, right? Okay, let's keep going, right? How hard is the lateral from sales and trading summer to full-time IB? I think it's definitely doable. But like, it's like full-time recruiting is never easy, because there's not nearly as many jobs for full-time as there is for summer internship recruiting. So like the margin for error is a lot smaller, right? But like we've helped some clients lateral from sales and trading over the summer into investment banking for full-time too, for full-time. So it could definitely be done. Okay. What are some basic steps you recommend to start taking right now / the summer as a sophomore student at a non-target school? If you're a rising sophomore, I assume when you say this summer as a sophomore student, if you're a rising sophomore, the most important thing is like make sure you're stacking internships on your resume. If you don't have enough relevant internships yet, you make sure you're doing that, because by the time the applications open up for you, which will be for summer 2025, that'll probably be open up by like the end of this year. So you have like basically the next 6 months to stack internships. That should be enough time to stack at least 2 to 3 internships on your resume. Okay. So that's very important. And then also like, pretty soon here, it's going to be time for you to start networking too. You want to start networking in advance. You don't want to wait until all the applications open before you start networking, right? So I would like do it in this order. I would beef up your resume, start networking with bankers, and then like do the behavioral prep, and then lastly do the technical prep. Like those 4 things in that order. That's usually the order of operations. Okay. All right. Next question. Is there summer internships every summer, for example, 2025? And so, yeah, there's summer internships every summer, but usually like you're only eligible to do the summer internship during your summer between your junior and your senior year if you're in college, or if you're an MBA student, then it's the summer between your first and second year. So basically they want you to do the summer internship during your last summer in school. And if you do well, that converts into a full-time offer after you graduate. Okay. Of course, prior to that summer, if it's like your freshman summer, sophomore summer, you can also do internships at smaller firms as well to beef up your resume. So that's what most people are doing. Okay. Ali asks, how does, actually, let me get a drink of water. All right. Been talking a lot, so super thirsty. Sorry about that. Ali asks, how does the pay later offer work for Wall Street Mastermind? I would really like to use that. Yeah. So our join now, pay later offer, or our join now, pay later program, for those of you that are wondering, it's a very new thing that we've been doing. We started doing this about 2 months ago. It's been really, really popular. We've gotten so many students that have signed up for the program through this program. Basically, what's happened is like, because we work with our the students in our program so closely and it's so high touch, and we spend so much time with our students, like we have to charge more than like a lot of the other resources they can get out there. Like if you just buy a PDF guide or like interview, like a PDF file, like an interview guide, like you might be able to get it for like $100, $200, or whatever, right? It's like they wrote the guide one time and they're selling it to like tens of thousands of people. They never talk to you. They don't give you any support. They don't answer any questions. They don't coach you. That's why it's cheap, right? But also like it doesn't work that well because like everyone's using those guides and the majority of the people that are using those guides aren't actually getting the offers, right? For us, we take the opposite approach, which is we spend a lot of time with every single individual, and that's what allows them to have a leg up on their competition and get the offer. But the downside to that is it costs a lot more, right? And so not everyone's able to afford it. And so we came up with this Join Now, Pay Later program. It's essentially our form of financial aid, right? So if you think about it, like a lot of you, like maybe you go to college and college is expensive, but you still want to go to college, and so you have to have financial aid, right? In some instances, like whether that's through grants or scholarships or student loans or whatever, or a combination of all of the above. And that's what allows you to be able to pay for school, which could these days cost, depending on the school you go to, upwards of $70,000 to $80,000 a year, right? Which is crazy. And so like we thought like, okay, what's our form of financial aid that we could be offering, right? And so this is essentially what we came up with, which is like for the students that actually could demonstrate a need for financial aid, like they really want to join our program, they really want to work with us, but like finances is the only reason why they can't afford to, then we will basically allow you to come in with a lower upfront fee based on whatever your current budget is that you can afford. And obviously, like, you know, we'll have to verify what that is, right? But we'll let you in for a discount based on your ability to pay, assuming you are the type of student that we actually want to bet on. Because what we're doing then is we're restructuring the discounted portion that we are giving you, like the discount we're giving you. We're not charging that today. We will delay your payment until after we've gotten you the job and after you start getting paid. So meaning if we don't get you the job, you don't have to pay, right? You don't have to pay us anything because except for that upfront portion. You don't have to pay us anything else if you don't get the job. So we're highly motivated and incentivized to get you the job. And by the way, we can only do this if we're highly confident that we're going to get you a job, because if we don't get paid what we call like the income share, right? It's a percentage of your first year salary. If we don't get paid the income share, we'll actually lose money on this deal because we're spending so much time with you. And like as a business, like we don't like losing money, right? And so that's kind of like at a high level how it works is we'll restructure the discounted portion as a future income share that you will only pay if we get you an offer, and it's not due until you actually start making money from the bank that you're going to be working for. So you can just pay it out of your paycheck, basically. Okay. And so if that happens, basically the assumption is that, hey, like the average college grad today is making $55,000 a year when they graduate. If we get you into investment banking, you're probably going to make somewhere between $150,000 to $200,000 your first year out of school. So we're going to be basically triple to quadruple your starting pay for your first year. And then we're going to take a very small percentage of your first year compensation. And so even after paying us like a very small percentage of your first year compensation, because you essentially doubled, tripled, or quadrupled your compensation, like you're still way ahead, right? Like if you double your compensation, that means you increase it by 100% and you pay us a few percentage of that, you still are up by like 90 something percent. That's the idea, right? And so that's how the Join Now, Pay Later program works. Not everyone qualifies for it because one, again, you have to be able to demonstrate financial need. Two, even if you can, like we don't like to do like, bad deals, meaning like we're not going to invite you into the program if we don't feel confident we can get you an offer. That's always been the case anyway. Like we don't like to invite people in the program unless we're very, very confident that we can get you a job, which is why we also have things like the money back guarantee and things like that. That's a different offer, right? But if we don't feel like, if you guys book a call with us and you talk to us and we feel like based on the situation you're describing, we don't feel confident we can get you the job, we'll actually just turn you away. Like we don't even want your money. We don't want your time because we don't like losing money. And we don't want to like waste your time, waste our time, get to the end of this result, have an unhappy customer, and like we didn't even make money on it anyway. Like what's the point, right? So we're not even going to invite you to work with us unless we're super, super confident that we're going to get you the job. That's the biggest difference between us and like every other program out there. Okay. So anyway, hopefully that answers your question, Ali. Like if you guys want to know more about that, feel free to book a call with us. Happy to answer more questions about, how this program works, right? Jenny asks, how do I secure a full-time offer? I have an internship this coming fall. If it's a fall internship, usually that doesn't convert into a full-time offer. So usually the only thing that converts into full-time offers are summer internships that you do, again, in the last summer of your either your college or your master's program. Okay, so I don't think that is really relevant for your fall internship. Reason I asked is I'm a transfer student and going into my junior year for my undergrad in the fall 2023, and I'll be graduating spring 2025. Oh, got it. Yeah. Vanui, there's internships every summer for sure. Okay. All right. Let me scroll through all the questions on Instagram because I know the Instagram folks have been waiting for a very long time. And I see a ton of questions here. I've gotten through all the questions on LinkedIn and on YouTube. So let me see what the Instagram folks have over here. All right. Instagram audience, thank you guys for being patient. I'm having the getting an internship. I don't know what am. Okay, so I don't know what that means. I'm going to skip that. Go to the next question. Past XD asks, are internships even solid? How long does it take on average to get employed through internships? Do they cover gas at least? I'm not sure what you mean by that, but usually most of the reputable banks will make you do a 9 to 10 week internship during your last summer in school. And these are very high paying internships. If you're at a reputable bank, you're probably making between $20,000 to $40,000 your junior summer, which is like phenomenal money for a college junior, to be honest. And then at the end of that internship, if you do well, they'll convert that into a full-time offer. And so, no, I don't think they cover gas, but like usually like because you're working late, they do pay for your Uber rides home. Okay. So, but you have to pay for your own commute into the office in the morning, but usually you just take like the subway or something like that. And it's not expensive. Let me go to the next question. I'm always applying and constantly checking, but I don't receive anything from companies. I'm super enthusiastic person, want to be in investment banking. Yeah, so HFlashboy11, like if you're constantly applying and checking, but you don't receive anything, like you don't hear back, that goes back to that first problem that I was describing before, which is you're having trouble getting interviews. So there's only like two potential issues. Maybe you have one, maybe you have both that's contributing to that. One is maybe your resume is not good enough. The other one is like maybe you're not doing enough networking, or maybe you're not doing any networking at all. So you got to like be really honest with yourself and figure out which of those two things are stopping you, or maybe it's both. And then once you've diagnosed the problem, figure out how to troubleshoot it, right? And if you need help with that, if you don't know how to do it, I would encourage you to, again, reach out to our team. You can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street's abbreviated to ST. So stmastermind.com/apply. Book a call with us. We can help you troubleshoot it. We'll help you diagnose what's not working well and what you need to do instead, so that you can stop kind of like making the same mistakes over and over again, or just like staying stuck where you are today, right? Let's go to the next question. Tips to get into real estate IB if I go to a design school and lack financial modeling background. Currently interning for my second year at Gardner and Theobald, one of the biggest global project and cost mana. I feel like that got cut off. I'm not familiar with Gardner and Theobald. I don't know if that's like a financial firm. I think you try to say biggest global project and cost manager. But regardless, like to get, if you're talking about getting entry-level positions in investment banking, like at the undergrad level, they don't really test you on your financial modeling skills. Like you need to learn how to build financial models once you're on the job. But for the interview process itself, especially if it's at like the bigger reputable banks, right? Like smaller banks, of course, there's thousands of them. They might do something weird, but like for the bigger banks, the elite boutiques, the bulge bracket and middle market banks, they do not give you modeling tests during your interview process. So it doesn't really matter if you don't have a financial modeling background. What matters is if you can demonstrate you have a genuine interest in this career path through your past experiences, through what you've done on your resume, through like internships, through clubs you're involved in on campus, and then through like your ability to, speak intelligently about the subject matter when you're networking with the people that currently already work there and or like during your interviews. Those are the things that you need to learn how to do. It has nothing to do with financial modeling. Okay. And so this place that you're currently working at, if it's relevant experience, then great. If it's not a relevant experience, then the most important thing is you got to go out and start getting some relevant internships. It's not even about like, like what you're studying in school and whatnot. Although when you say design school, I'm not sure if that's like a traditional 4-year bachelor's degree. If it's not, then it's probably going to be tough because usually you need a 4-year bachelor's degree in order to be considered for investment banking. So hopefully that helps. Scallywag99. So let me go to the next question. I'm on a gap semester and wonder whether I should let the firm know. Vita, I don't think that really matters if you're on a gap semester. I think typically the firms just care about what your graduation date actually is because that affects your start date. So like if you're graduating in, I don't know what your graduation date is, but let's say you're graduating in May 2023, then you would probably start in like July of 2023, right? If you're graduating in like December of 2023, like if you took a gap semester and your graduation date got pushed back by a semester, and now you're graduating December 2023, well, now you can't start July 2023. Now you're not gonna be able to start until their following class, which is July of 2024. In which case, yeah, they're absolutely gonna want to know. In fact, there could be a risk that they might rescind your offer if that's the case, because they allotted a headcount for you during your original start date, and they may or may not still have a spot for their following start date. So that you want to be careful about, and it could be a little bit tricky. And if that's going to be the case, you might want to see if there's any other way that you could make up for the gap semester by maybe taking a heavier course load and still graduate on time or something like that. Okay. All right, let's go to the next question. Scrolling down Instagram. Are there summer internships every year, for example, 2025 and et cetera? Yeah, I think this is the same question that I already answered on YouTube. So I think this is from the same person. So yes, there are summer internships every single summer. You want to make sure the most important one is getting the one during your last summer before you graduate. Okay. Can you list a few banks that are still recruiting? Dude, honestly, like I would say like if you look up like the Vault prestige rankings, okay, it's like a list of top 50 firms. I would say like most of the firms in the top 20 are either done or close to being done. For the next 30 firms, a lot of those are also done, but like probably like the firms that are lower on that list, the lower they are on that list, the more likely it is that they're still recruiting. But again, just like I said earlier, none of these firms are going to like publicly announce that they're done with recruiting officially. So you're going to have to network with the people at those firms to find out, right? And like barring that, like it's impossible to tell me like definitively like which firms are still recruiting and which firms are not. Okay. Let's go to the next question. I got fired for crying in IC because a pigeon flew into the window and died. How do I explain this in future interviews? Sophomore as CS. First of all, I don't know. That sounds kind of crazy. I'm not even sure if this is a real question or if it's a trolling question, but assuming it's a real question, honestly, I would just tell the truth. Like, if that's really what happened, I don't think you necessarily did anything wrong, although I'm not sure why. Yeah, like, I don't know why someone would get fired for that, to be honest. It's just like, and I guess like if you tell the truth and your interviewers are like, I don't know, like are like mean about it, then like maybe that's not the type of firm that you want to work for anyway. I don't know. But sorry, I don't have a great answer for that. That was a really weird curveball. I never heard that one before. So someone said it's too late to recruit for 2024 as a rising senior. Yeah, if you're a rising senior, that means that you're actually graduating in May of 2024. So you wouldn't be recruiting for a summer 2024 internship. You would actually be recruiting for a full 2024 full-time start. So if you're a recruiter for a 2024 full-time position, full-time recruiting is on a different timeline. What's going to happen is their summer 2023 interns are going through their internship now. In fact, they're starting this week. This is their first week. They're going to intern for the next 9 to 10 weeks. At the end of this internship, so in like early to mid-August-ish, they're going to give the interns that they like return offers to come back. Okay. After that, they're going to know. So right around then, around early to mid-August, they're going to know how many spots they want to hire or they're trying to fill and how many interns they actually want to bring back. And also how many of those interns actually accepted. And at any remaining spots that are left that have not been taken, not been filled by the summer interns, they will then do another round of recruiting, which is called full-time recruiting, basically starting in August and then maybe like lasting for no more than 1 or 2 months. And so like that's what you're going to be aiming for. So like if that's what you're aiming for, like if you're a rising senior and you want to break into banking and you want to recruit for full-time, you need to be prepping now. Prepping as in like, like hopefully you're doing an internship elsewhere, even if it's not an IB for this summer. and hopefully you're getting a good experience. You need to be prepped like how you're going to talk about that experience. You also want to like start networking with these bankers as soon as possible. And then also like you have to be ready to interview by the time August rolls around, right? If you do get any interviews. So it's not too late to recruit for 2024, but you're going to be recruiting for a full-time opportunity as opposed to a summer internship. Okay, so that's the key difference. C Jagger 323. If I'm doing an internship in headhunting, does that transfer to an internship in finance for next year? Right now, I'm going into my sophomore year at Wharton College. No, I don't think like doing headhunting is super relevant for finance. Like that's more relevant if you want to like go into recruiting, you know? So I would try to do some finance internships. Like you want to do something that's like transactional in nature, ideally. So like working at a small investment bank, working at a private equity firm, working at a search fund, working at like, you know, even M&A advisory firm, business brokers, like that type of firm where you're like working on mergers and acquisitions or M&A deals or even capital raising deals. So that's why I say like transactional finance. Or alternatively, if not that, you want to work at like investing type roles where you're going to have to like analyze investments. You know, like look like analyze individual stocks, individual companies. You have to value the business. You have to like do valuation work. So it could be like a hedge fund, a family office, equity research, valuation firm, like corporate, and also I'll add corporate development to the transactional side of things, which is like doing M&A in-house for an actual company. Like, so there's a lot of different options in terms of like relevant internships you can actually do for banking, but I would not say headhunting is like one of those internships. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Serious question. I want to do IB really badly. Just graduated college, 3.4 GPA, equity research experience at a small firm. I just can't seem to get any interviews and experience at SCI Investments. I'm not sure what SCI Investments is, but I would say, look, if you already graduated, but you're currently working in equity research, it is possible to lateral into banking. You might have to lateral into like a smaller firm to start, like usually like lower middle market or regional boutique firms. But so that means like hopefully you're not an international student, you don't need visa sponsorship, because if you do need visa sponsorship, it's going to be very, very tough. All right, because most of those smaller firms don't sponsor. But assuming you don't need sponsorship, like you're a U.S. citizen or you're a green card holder, what I would do is try to lateral from equity research into investment banking. And then once you're in investment banking at one of these smaller firms, after you do that for 6 to 12 months, you can try to lateral up to a bigger bank. So maybe you lateral up to a middle market bank or lateral up to a bulge bracket bank or something like that, right? And like we've helped students like you who have graduated do exactly that. Like if you've already graduated, the biggest question that we would have in terms of like whether it's feasible or not is like, are you working in like a field that's at least tangential to banking or not, right? Like you have to at least be doing something related to finance. If you're trying to go from like marketing to banking, it's going to be very, very tough, almost impossible. You're probably going to have to go back to business school. But because you're actually doing equity research and you want to lateral into banking, that we've done many times because we help people lateral into banking after they've graduated from things like sales and trading, corporate banking, valuation, equity research, corporate development, even FP&A, even accounting, like audit, asset management. Like, so a lot of these are like, some of these are more relevant than others, but bottom line is like, in our experience, as long as you're actually already in finance and you're not an international student, you should be able to lateral into banking and then just work your way up from there. Okay, so that would be my advice. If you're having trouble getting interviews, then again, it goes back to the two things I was talking about earlier. It's like either your resume is not good enough, or you're not presenting yourself in a way that's good enough, or you're not networking enough, or you don't know how to network, right? And so like if you need help with those things, again, reach out to our team, www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. Streets abbreviated to ST, wallstmastermind.com/apply. Book a call with our team, and we're happy to help you out. Okay. Let's go to the next question. Will Velasquez. Okay. Do you think a master's in finance could give someone extra time to secure an offer if they are unsuccessful or too late in their undergrad years? Yes. Some of our students have used this strategy where they delay graduation either by taking an extra like 9th semester, like usually college is 8 semesters, right? So they take a 9th semester, so they graduate in 4.5 years instead. And what that does is it reclassifies you into the following class, right? And so you can now, like, if you are originally graduating in class of 2024 and you had to recruit for summer 2023 internships, now you can graduate in class of 2025 and recruit for summer 2024 internship. So that buys you more time. It extends your runway, right? And getting a master's in finance is the same idea. Instead of like delaying by one semester, you're delaying by an entire year. Usually most master's in finance programs are 1 year. There are also some programs that are 1.5 or even 2 years, which will delay even longer. But just depends on like how many classes you want to push yourself back by. How much time do you need to buy for yourself, right? And then like there's trade-offs between just delaying, staying in undergrad for an extra semester versus doing a master's in finance, meaning like master's in finance is usually more expensive, but like you do get a master's degree instead of just, still getting a bachelor's degree. And so like those are things to think through. But yeah, long story short, absolutely. That is one way to extend your runway. But I will say if you're going to do that, you got to make sure that whatever mistakes you made the last time that prevented you from getting into banking, you figure out what those things are, and then you do it better this time. Because otherwise, you're going to end up paying for a master's in finance degree, which could be anywhere from high 5 figures to low 6 figures. You're going to pay all that money. You're going to spend an extra year plus of your life, and you're going to still end up with no offer at the end of that process. Like that would be like hugely detrimental to you, right? And to your bank account. So like if you're going to invest the time and the money to buy yourself that second chance, so to speak, then make sure you really, really, again, go back to what I said earlier, like diagnose what you did wrong the first time and what you should be doing differently this time. And again, if you don't know how to do that, reach out to us. And we're happy to help you out. Okay. Cuz022 asks, does your org only support candidates wishing to go into IB, or do you advise on equity research as well? We can definitely advise you on equity research as well. We have students that have gone into equity research. Now, most of our students would prefer to go into IB than equity research because IB pays a lot more. Initially in the early years, it's not that big of a difference, but like over time, like if you go look at like the liquidity compensation report, he actually has a slide on this where he looks like investment banking pay over time versus sales and trading pay over time versus equity research pay over time. And then like investment banking is the highest, followed by sales and trading, followed by equity research, right? So, but yeah, like honestly, the skills that you need to recruit for equity research is almost exactly the same as what you need to know for investment banking, except the bar is not as high. It's a little bit less competitive. It's easier to get into, and you don't need to know as much on the technical side. You need to know a subset of what you need to know for investment banking, but you don't need to know like M&A and LBO stuff, but you still need to know like accounting and valuation and things like that, right? And so we can absolutely still help you if that's what you want to do. Obviously, like even though you're getting paid less, your work-life balance is going to be a lot better, and maybe that's what you want, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? So yeah, we can help you with that. Let's go to the next question. What is the best way to find LL/MM banks in NYC? Also, ER experience was just an internship from September to November. Yeah, networking, I guess, would be the main issues. I'll submit an application for help. Yeah, man, submit an application. We're happy to talk to you about it more. And then like also like, if we do end up working with you, like we have a bunch of different like resources that we can show you in terms of like how to find these like smaller firms. Like there's like databases out there that honestly are like free to access that like a lot of people just aren't aware of it. Like we could point you to those. It's super easy. We also have our own proprietary database that we've compiled with like over 1,200 or 1,300 firms that we'll share with you. There's also like, there's also paid ways to do this. Like if you have access to Cap IQ, and a lot of you, like if you go to your school library or your school's business school library, you can ask them to have a subscription to Cap IQ. And if they do, you can use it to run like screens for like different companies and whatever. So like you can run a screen for like all the investment banks in the New York area, and it'll give you like probably a list of like hundreds, if not thousands of firms, right? And so that's also another way that you could do that. But we can show you how to do all that if you do end up working with us. But that's how I would do it at a high level, okay? From military to investment banking, any advice? Is it possible? Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. Like investment banks love veterans. In fact, some investment banks have like diversity programs for veterans specifically, where they consider veterans as like a minority group that they want to hire more of. It's like females and like Black, Hispanics, and Native Americans and LGBTQ and people with disabilities, and then like veterans. Like those are usually the 5 or 6 different categories that qualify for diversity. So yeah, absolutely, you can get in as a veteran. In fact, sometimes it's easier to get in as a veteran, but obviously like there's a lot of other stuff that goes into it. Like I don't know anything about you, C Foley 100. Like how old are you? What's your experience? Like, obviously, the older you get, the harder it becomes. So like, if you're like just getting out of the military, then I would try to make that transition into banking as quickly as possible if that's something that you want to do. Because the sooner you do it, the easier it's going to be, right? So yeah, that's what I would say about that. All right. Feel free to reach out to us if you have more questions about it. Will Velasquez says, how much would you say major matters? How much would you say a major matters coming from current economics student thinking of changing a finance major? Your major doesn't really matter that much. If you're majoring, especially if you're majoring in economics already, like economics and finance, it's literally like the same. The banks don't care what you major in. Like we have people that get into banking from like bioengineering, from like liberal arts majors. Like they really don't care what you study in school, but what they will care about is like what kind of relevant experience do you have on your resume from outside of school, like internships, like extracurricular activities, like things like that. That matters a lot more. So I don't think you need to like switch to a finance major just for the sake of recruiting. I would focus on like the other stuff that actually really moves the needle. Okay. Okay. So I think we got one more question on Instagram, and I'm going to circle back to YouTube and LinkedIn real quick because I saw a few more questions came in there. And I know we're way over time. I was going to actually end this like 17 minutes ago, but we'll go a little bit longer just to get through all the questions because I don't want to leave you guys hanging. Okay. So Saad Qureshi says, how can I secure a winter internship for 2023 with no experience? Currently doing MBA finance with GPA 3.55. Yeah, I mean, so typically, like if you have no relevant prior experience, like you're gonna have to start with the smaller firms. So like it doesn't make sense for you to like apply to like most people, what they do is they go on like LinkedIn and Glassdoor and Indeed and Google Jobs, and they apply to like whatever job postings they can find. And those are really, really competitive because those are like really popular websites. Everyone's on them. Everyone sees those jobs. Usually those jobs each job will have like hundreds of applications. And so like, it's just really, really hard to compete with that when you have no relevant experience. Like what are the chances that no one else out of hundreds of people have more experience than you do? It's almost like non-existent, right? And so like the way to get your foot in the door for your first internship, usually what we recommend is like, you're going to have to do cold outreach. You're going to have to like network your way into smaller firms that are not necessarily advertising their positions on these job sites. And you're going to have to like basically find these firms, reach out to them, inquire about internship, and like really just hustle because you're trying to get someone to like take a chance on you and help you get your foot in the door. And you have no experience. You don't have like a lot to offer. So usually like a lot of times you're also going to have to work unpaid, right? Because the only thing you have to offer is like free labor, right? And so like, again, this is about like knowing where to look. Instead of like looking in like these super crowded places or really super crowded job sites, like, having access to like different databases, or like I said earlier, using CapIQ, using our proprietary database, using other free databases out there that have a list of a lot of these small firms. That's where I would start. Okay. Is changing major from MBA finance to MSF at Baruch College beneficial? Being an international student? No, I wouldn't say it's beneficial, but like it depends on like what your graduation date is, right? Like if you're an international student, you basically need, ideally you're not like recruiting for the full-time cycle, and ideally you're recruiting for the summer internship cycle because the full-time cycle has a lot less jobs. And as an international student, you already have less jobs because not every firm's willing to sponsor. So if you stack both of those things on top of each other, usually in our experience, it becomes very, very difficult. And so like if you want to recruit for summer internships, so like at the MBA level, like that happens during your first semester in your first year. If the business school is 2 years, recruiting for a summer internship happens during the first semester of your first year. So like if you already passed that, it's going to be hard to recruit for a summer internship as an MBA. But you go back to MSF, most MSFs are 1 year, which means like your last summer in school is actually the summer before you start the MSF. So that doesn't really work either. So that's why I say like that isn't really that beneficial. All right. Oliver says, looking at CapIQ now. Thanks for the advice. Yeah, no problem, man. All right, let me come back to YouTube and finish off some of the questions here because we're getting quite a few. Ollie says, I think my biggest issue has been networking. I've gotten a few interviews, but never gotten the offer for IB. What does WSNM do to help with networking? So with networking, honestly, like there's two things that have to happen, right? There's one is a numbers game. So just to like put things into context, like depending on if you go to target school, non-target school. If you go to non-target school, you have to do a lot more networking than if you go to a target school, because you have a lot less alumni from your school who are actually willing to help, or who actually, you have a lot of alumni in general that are working on Wall Street, and so your conversion rate is going to be lower, right? So, whereas like a target school student might be reaching out to like hundreds of bankers throughout the process, some of our non-target school students, they're reaching out to like thousands of bankers. Like I'm talking like between 2,500 to 3,000 bankers, right? So that number might be like jaw-dropping for a lot of you, because I know a lot of students who are like, oh yeah, I've done a lot of networking. And I ask them like, how much networking have you done? And like, oh, I reached out to like 50 bankers already. And they say that like really proudly. And I'm like, okay, that's actually not that much. Like we have students that do that in like 2 days, right? But like that gives you like a sense of kind of like a reality check, or like a sense of scale in terms of like how much work is actually involved. So part of it is like, one, how do you even find that many leads to fill the top of your funnel, right? So we teach you how to do that. Two is like, okay, even if you have that many leads, how do you do this in like a systematic and automated way so that it's streamlined and you're not like wasting a ton of time doing like manual grunt work, right? And so you have to automate and streamline as much of this as possible when you're trying to network at that scale. If you're only reaching out to like 50 bankers, you can do that, everything manually, that's fine. But like, that's not enough, right? And so like teaching you our system for how to streamline and automate your process to save you a bunch of time and give you your time back, so you can like also work on all the other things you need to work on, right? And then like the third part is like, I would say kind of like one of the first questions I answered on this call, which is like all the best practices for conversion, right? Like now that you have a list of bankers you want to reach out to, like what do you say when you reach out to get as many of them to respond as possible? And then like out of the people that respond, like, or out of the people that don't respond, like what do you say when you follow up? How often do you follow up? Like how do you get them to respond on maybe like the second try or the third try, right? And then like people that do respond, what do you actually talk to them about when you're on this call, right? To get them to like you, to get them like to impress them, to win them over, to get them to like be able to proactively offer you a referral without you even having to ask for it, right? And then like at the end of the call, like after you get out of the call, like what happens after the first call? Like how do you nurture that relationship? How do you stay on their radar? How do you make sure they don't forget about you? Like there's so many things that actually like go into like this, what we call the networking process, that most people are just not thinking about. But it's actually very nuanced when you break it down step by step. There's multiple steps, and each step has its own conversion rate, meaning like from one step to the next, some people are going to drop off. Some people are going to drop off. Some people are going to drop off. And so it's almost like you have this leaky funnel. How do you patch up all the leaks as much as possible so that like if you put in 100 leads at the top, you get like 20 or 30 leads that make it through to the other end, as opposed to like 3 to 5 leads, right? Like, so that's kind of like what we focus on when we help people with networking. And then like, of course, like you're the one that has to go out and actually do the networking, but it basically saves you a lot of time. Like for the same amount of networking you do, you're going to get a lot more interviews and a lot more referrals out of it, right? Like it sounds like you got a few interviews. A lot of times like few interviews is not enough, because like the offer rate at these interviews is so low that most people need at least several interviews in order to get one offer, even if they're really, really prepared, right? So hopefully that answers your question. All right. I keep getting financial advising role offers. How hard is it to transfer to IB? Yeah, Luis, I mean, financial advising roles offers are a lot easier to get than IB. So that's not surprising, right? In terms of how hard is it to transfer to IB, it's hard for me to answer that because I don't know anything about you. So I need to see your profile. I need to see your resume. I need to know like what your graduation date is. I need to know what your GPA is. I need to know what kind of relevant experience you have. I just need to know a lot more about you to be able to answer that question. But in general, it should be doable to go from financial advising to IB. But I would say like it's never going to be easy, right? Nib Marty says, can you explain the mid-year convention for a DCF? Yeah, sure. Oh, our first technical question today. Okay. So what the mid-year convention is for a DCF is that without doing the mid-year convention, when you discount the cash flows back to present value, what you're essentially assuming is that that entire cash flow for the year is happening at the end of the year. It's happening on like December 31st of every single year. Now, if you think about how a business actually operates, like for most businesses, unless it's like a really seasonal business, like if you sell Christmas cards, yeah, sure, most of your cash flow is going to come in December, right? But like if you're like most businesses, you have cash flow coming in every single day, right? And so it's not accurate to say like, oh, we're only going to make money on the last day of the month, right? And so what the mid-year convention is or sorry, on the last day of the year. We're only going to make money on December 31st of every single year. So like what the mid-year convention is saying like, hey, assuming we get like an equal amount of cash flow every single day throughout the year, we're going to just assume all that cash flow, like the average of that means we're getting all that cash flow halfway through the year at the midpoint. So on like June 30th-ish. And so we're going to discount it back from the midpoint of the year. So your year one cash flow, instead of discounting it back one full year, you're only discounting it back 6 months. Your year two cash flow, instead of discounting it back 2 full years, you're only discounting it back 1.5 years. Your year three cash flow, instead of discounting it back from the end of year three, you're discounting it back from halfway through year three, which is 2.5 years, right? So to get to the present value, you're basically discounting every cash flow back by half a year or less. And that gets you to like a more accurate representation of what your DCF valuation should be. Okay, so that's like how I would explain that conceptually, Nib. Hopefully that makes sense. And by the way, guys, like if that actually made sense to you, like here's also part of the reason why most people struggle with technicals is that if you don't have someone like me or someone who actually is good at explaining these concepts to you in a way that's easy to understand, a lot of times it's really easy. It's really hard to figure this stuff out on your own. Like if you're stuck, you're just stuck. Like you don't understand why something is the way it is, right? And so like it's one thing to be able to like do this, like to understand how DCF works, but like being able to teach it is a completely different skill, right? And so like for all the coaches on our team, like we have to be able to teach and explain these concepts very well and very easy in an easy and concise manner that's easy to understand for like in layman terms, so that even if someone that doesn't understand finance can understand. So like that's also like how we try to teach the technicals. So like we tell everyone, all of our students, like how you know whether you're ready for the technical interview is like if you get to the point where you can actually teach these concepts to your younger brother who's in 6th grade who knows nothing about finance. Because if you could do that, that means you're actually ready and you'll be able to explain anything you want in these interview settings, right? So that's like the beauty of having someone coach you on the technicals versus you trying to like self-study on your own, right? So hopefully that gives you kind of like a glimpse into that, right? Can you do a full DCF from Yahoo Finance alone? I don't think you can actually, because if I'm not mistaken, like on Yahoo Finance, they don't have projections. And so for DCF, like you need to be able to project out what's going to happen for the next 5 to 10 years. And so Yahoo Finance just doesn't do that. Usually you need like access to like equity research reports, which will usually have like projections 3 to 5 years out, and then you will plug that into your DCF. So I don't think you can actually do that on Yahoo Finance. Okay. Considering the current landscape in IB, down deal flow, banks tanking, how much harder is it going to be for summer 2024 interns to secure full-time offers? It's a good question. In a bad market, it's definitely going to be harder. But nobody knows what's going to happen for the class of summer 2024, because what's actually happening is when they hire the class of 2024, the summer 2024 class, which is like what they've been doing for the last 6 months, they're hiring based on what's going on in the market today, right? And then when they determine how many full-time offers they want to give, they're going to determine that around, like I said, August of 2024, which is at the end of the internship. So depending on how the economy is doing around August 2024, that's the other variable here. So if the market is actually doing better in August 2024 than it has been for the last 6 months, then that probably means they underhire for the summer intern class. In which case, like the offer rate is going to be very high because they have a need for more full-time hires than they actually have enough interns for, right? Now, if the market conditions during August 2024 is worse than what it has been for the last 6 months, then the offer rate is going to be a lot worse because they have more interns than they have actual full-time offers for, right? So it's all relative. And sitting here today in June of 2023, I can't tell you what the market is going to be like in August 2024. If I could tell you what the market is going to be like in August 2024, I would probably be as rich as Warren Buffett and I wouldn't be sitting here, right? And so like, honestly, like that's just like, I don't even bother spending time like worrying about that kind of stuff. It's like if you already have some 2024 offer, the market's going to be what it's going to be. That's out of your control. Even if you lose sleep over it, it's not going to change. What is in your control is how good of an intern you can be. So you need to like control the things you can control. You need to be doing the things right now to prepare yourself to be the best intern possible so that you can be the top of your class. And like, if you're the top of your intern class, it doesn't matter how many spots they have, like you're going to get a return offer. It's only the people that are in like the bottom half of the class that have to worry about things like return offer rate or how is the market doing, because like they're going to give return offers. 99% of the time, they're going to give return offers no matter what. Unless you're like really, really unlucky like me and you intern at Bear Stearns in the summer of 2007, like then that's just like really shit luck, right? But that's probably not going to happen. So, are there numbers? Yahoo Finance doesn't make the numbers enough to make projection. Can you make a video on this? I'm probably not going to make a video on this, just to be honest, because it's kind of a pointless exercise. But are the numbers enough to make projections? I've never looked at Yahoo Finance to see in a long time. Not never. I haven't looked at it in a long time to see what numbers they provide. My understanding is they have some historical numbers. So like if you just have historical numbers and you want to project yourself, yeah, you can make the projections yourself on your own. But like it's a little bit harder because you have to like be able to justify, like, okay, I think revenue is going to grow by this much. Like, but why? I think margins are going to go up or go down, but why? All right. You have to be able to like project each line item and have a rationale for why you think it's going to like stay flat or go up or go down. And then like you basically just flow down your income statement and also like some of your cash flow items to get to a free cash flow number. And then like, that's kind of how you do your DCF, right? So like, yeah, I mean, in theory, you could do it, but like, it's not the easiest thing to do. And you also don't really need Yahoo Finance for that. Like if you're just using actual financials, you can just go directly to like the public financial filings from the company. Like there's nothing special about Yahoo Finance, right? So I'm not sure if there's a reason why you're asking specifically about how to do this with Yahoo Finance, but like, that's just, I don't think I would do it that way. Okay. All right, guys. So I think that's pretty much all the questions that we have from Instagram and from YouTube and LinkedIn. I intended to stay on here for an hour, but I ended up staying for 90 minutes. So for those of you that are still on, thank you for staying the entire way. Hopefully this was really helpful for you guys. Again, just to recap, if you guys want help with the investment banking recruiting process, if you found any of this advice helpful today and you want more of this, in fact, you want more like one-on-one customized advice that where we can just walk through the entire recruiting process with you step by step from now until you get an offer from both me personally, as well as the rest of my team, as well as, you know, the former global head of on-campus recruiting at 2 different bulge bracket banks who we're bringing onto our team soon, then I will highly encourage you guys to reach out to us and schedule a call with our team. You can go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST, so it's stmastermind.com/apply. And we'll learn more about your situation. We'll see what you need help with. We'll give you some advice on what we think. We'll help you diagnose, you know, what the issues are and also help you troubleshoot it a little bit. And then from there, you can decide if you want our help or if you don't want our help. If you want to learn more about our Join Now, Pay Later program, if you want to learn more about our money back guarantee, like we have, you know, multiple different programs and packages and offers that you can choose from. We always do our best to customize it for each individual's needs. And there's no pressure to join whatsoever after you talk to us. Like if you don't want to join, don't join. That's totally fine. You can take what we give you and go out and try to do it on your own. To be honest, to be completely honest, you're going to have a much easier time and you're going to get a much better outcome 99% of the time if you have our help than if you don't. But hey, I know some people are stubborn. Some people want to fail on their own a couple of times before they get help, or some people just like, you know, just want to do everything on their own. If that's the case, no worries, no harm, no foul. We're happy to just give you some free advice. So again, if you're interested in that, go to www.wallstreetmastermind.com/apply. The street is abbreviated to ST, so it's stmastermind.com/apply. And we look forward to talking to you guys. All right. So again, other than that, if you guys just have like, you know, simple one-off questions that you don't really want to jump on a call for, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, or you can go to our Instagram page and just DM our page, which is at Wall Street Mastermind. And we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We get a lot of messages every single day, so it might not be right away. If we somehow don't get back to you, we're not ignoring you on purpose. Usually that just means that your message got lost in the shuffle, in which case just ping us again and we'll usually respond eventually. Okay. Anyway, thank you guys for showing up. Hopefully this is helpful, and we'll be back again around this time next month for next month's Q&A. All right. So hopefully I'll see you guys there. All right. Talk to you later. Bye.